Maria adjusted the strap of her worn-out backpack as she stepped out of her small apartment, carrying the smell of freshly cooked rice and vegetables with her. She was 21 years old, studying business at the local college, and working part-time to support her tuition fees. The little job she had taken at the catering company was not glamorous, but it paid just enough to help her stay afloat. Every day, she woke up early, packed her books for class, and then picked up deliveries before heading to her afternoon lectures. This day felt no different, and Maria believed it would pass as ordinarily as all the others. The streets were already alive with the sounds of the city. Vendors were setting up stalls, buses honked impatiently as they tried to squeeze through traffic, and the air was filled with the aroma of roasted corn, tea stalls, and morning breakfast snacks being sold at every corner. Maria knew these streets by heart. She rode her old bicycle carefully, balancing two lunchboxes strapped neatly at the back. Each meal was cooked fresh by the catering shop she worked for, and she had learned how to handle them without spilling even a spoonful. The heat of the food pressed faintly against the box, and she could smell the familiar fragrance of curry and chapati as she pedaled. Maria did not complain about the work. In fact, she liked the routine. There was a rhythm to it: pick up the order, check the address, ride through traffic, smile politely at the receptionist or security guard, hand over the lunch, and then hurry back for the next one. It was tiring, yes, but it gave her a strange sense of responsibility. She felt useful. She felt like she was doing something important, even if it was as simple as delivering food to someone who was too busy to cook or go out to eat. After all, a warm lunch meant more than just food. It meant comfort, it meant energy for the rest of the day. Maria often thought about this as she cycled from street to street, imagining the person who would open the box and feel a small moment of happiness. On this particular afternoon, the sun was harsher than usual. It was the middle of summer, and sweat gathered quickly on her forehead. She stopped briefly at a traffic signal, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. Her phone buzzed in her pocket with a message from the shop. 2 deliveries were scheduled for the next hour, both to nearby office buildings. She checked the addresses carefully, memorized the routes, and tucked the phone back. She had no time to waste if she wanted to reach college before her lecture started later in the day. Despite the heat, Maria enjoyed observing the world around her as she cycled. She noticed the man selling balloons by the corner, the group of children chasing each other barefoot on the pavement, and the elderly lady bargaining fiercely with a vegetable vendor. These little moments of life gave her comfort. They reminded her that she was not alone in her struggles. Everyone was trying to make their way through the day, everyone carrying their own worries and hopes. She smiled softly at that thought and pushed forward, weaving carefully between cars. As she reached the first office building, she parked her bicycle by the side, straightened her slightly crumpled shirt, and walked into the air-conditioned lobby. The sudden coolness made her sigh in relief. She greeted the receptionist, delivered the first lunchbox, and received a quick signature. The entire exchange took less than 5 minutes, but Maria always made sure to remain polite. She had learned that kindness, even in small jobs, left a lasting impression. People remembered the way you treated them more than anything else. Now she had one more delivery left before she could return to the shop. She secured the strap of her bag once again and stepped back into the sweltering heat. The second delivery was to a tall building a few blocks away, one of those glass towers where employees rushed in and out with files and laptops. She had delivered there a few times before. Usually, she would hand a lunchbox to the front desk and leave without meeting the client directly. It was quick, efficient, and uneventful. She expected today to be the same. As she pedaled toward the building, Maria thought about her upcoming exam. She had been struggling with a particular subject, and the late-night study sessions often left her exhausted. Sometimes she wished she could just focus on her studies without worrying about money. But reality did not work that way. Her father had lost his job a year ago, and her mother was working part-time as a seamstress. The little income Maria brought home mattered, and she could not imagine quitting, no matter how hard it became. Her determination was stronger than her fatigue, and she often reminded herself that this was only temporary. Better days would come. She parked her bicycle outside the building and carefully picked up the remaining lunchbox. The packaging was neat, the aroma still fresh, and she held it firmly to avoid spilling anything. As she entered through the glass doors, the lobby bustled with people rushing to meetings, answering phones, or waiting for elevators. Maria walked quickly, her eyes scanning for the reception desk. But just as she turned a corner, it happened she bumped into someone. The impact was not harsh, but enough to make her stumble slightly. The lunchbox tilted dangerously, and Maria gasped, trying to steady it before the lid slipped off. To her relief, she managed to save it at the last moment, though a few drops of curry had smeared against the side. Her cheeks flushed red with embarrassment as she looked up at the person she had bumped into. He was a tall man, dressed in a well-fitted suit, holding a briefcase in one hand. His expression was not angry, but rather curious, almost amused. Maria immediately apologized, speaking quickly, her voice low with nervousness. She feared he might scold her, or worse, complain to the building management. Instead, the man gave a small smile. His tone was calm as he asked if she was all right. Maria nodded, clutching the lunchbox tightly, still worried about the mess she might have caused. She explained softly that she was making a delivery and did not see him coming around the corner. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes resting on the simple uniform she wore and the tired but determined look on her face. Maria, still flustered, excused herself and stepped aside, eager to finish the delivery and leave before more people noticed the scene. She felt her heart beating faster than usual, embarrassed at how clumsy she had been. She could not have guessed that this small accident, this ordinary collision in a crowded lobby, was about to change her day and perhaps even her life in ways she could not yet imagine. Maria stood in the lobby for a brief second, still embarrassed about bumping into the man in the suit. She adjusted the lunchbox in her hand, took a small breath, and walked toward the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman who already recognized her from previous deliveries, gave her a kind smile. Maria placed the box gently on the counter, signed the delivery slip, and stepped back, ready to leave quickly. She hoped the man she had bumped into would already be gone by the time she turned around. But when she did, he was still there. He was standing a few feet away, watching her with quiet interest. His briefcase rested against his leg, and though he looked like he was in a hurry, he didn't seem upset. Maria lowered her gaze, feeling her cheeks warm again, and walked past him. But as she reached the glass door, she heard his voice. "Excuse me," he said in a polite tone. "Do you work for the catering service?" Maria turned around, unsure why he was asking. She nodded lightly, gripping the strap of her bag. "Yes, sir," she replied softly. For some reason, the man's smile widened a little. "I see. You seem to handle the meals with a lot of care. Do you mind telling me, are they good?" The question caught her off guard. Clients rarely spoke to her directly about the food. Usually, she only dealt with receptionists, clerks, or office assistants. She wasn't sure how to answer, but after a small pause, she gave a simple response. "Yes, sir. They are good. The meals are fresh every morning." The man chuckled gently, noticing how reserved she was. "Would you let me try one?" he asked suddenly. Maria blinked, not sure if she had heard him correctly. "Sir," she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "One of those lunch boxes," he repeated, his tone still friendly. "Do you have another with you?" Maria hesitated. She remembered the shop's strict rule: every lunchbox had to be delivered exactly to the person who ordered it. She could not just hand them out, no matter who asked. She shook her head slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I only had 2 today. One I delivered upstairs, and this one was for the front desk. I don't have an extra. The man nodded thoughtfully, not offended by her answer. He seemed to respect her honesty. But his curiosity wasn't satisfied yet. Tell me, he continued, lowering his voice so others wouldn't overhear, how is the work? Do they treat you fairly? You look very dedicated, but also very tired. Maria felt her heart quicken. No one ever asked her that. People usually saw her as just another delivery girl, invisible in the busy rush of the day. She hesitated again, unsure whether to share the truth. If she said too much, what if he reported her? If she stayed quiet, maybe he would just let her go. But something in his expression, calm, genuine, not judgmental, gave her courage. It's not bad, she began carefully. I get paid on time, and the work is steady. But, she stopped, looking down at the lunchbox in her hand. But, he encouraged gently. But sometimes it's very hard, she admitted. We don't have proper bags to keep the food hot for long rides. I use my backpack and cloths to keep it steady, but on sunny days like this, it's difficult. And the delivery schedule is always tight. If I'm late, the customer complains, and I have to answer for it. The man listened quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. He could see she was speaking honestly, though she chose her words carefully. Maria realized she had said more than she intended and quickly added, but it's fine. I need the job, and the people at the shop are kind. We all work hard. That's all. There was a short silence between them. Maria shifted her weight from one foot to the other, ready to excuse herself and leave. But before she could move, the man asked another question. How long have you been working here? Almost 7 months, she replied, her voice steadier now. And you're studying too? Maria was surprised again. Yes. College. Afternoon classes. He nodded slowly, as if piecing together a picture in his mind. His curiosity seemed unusual for a stranger in a busy office building, yet he asked with such ease that Maria didn't feel threatened. Instead, she felt slightly puzzled. Why was he so interested in her small job? The receptionist behind the counter looked up, noticing the unusual conversation. She raised her eyebrows slightly but said nothing. Maria, embarrassed again, gave a small bow and said politely, I should go now, sir. Thank you. She turned to leave, but once more, his voice followed her. Wait. Maria stopped in her tracks. The man took a step closer, still keeping a respectful distance. What's your name? For a moment, Maria considered whether to tell him. She wasn't used to strangers asking personal questions, and she had always been cautious. But something about his calm, professional manner made her believe it was harmless. Maria, she said finally. The man's eyes lit up slightly, as if he were filing the name away for later. Maria. A good name. Well, Maria, thank you for being honest. Not everyone would have answered me the way you did. She gave a quick nod, unsure how to respond, and walked briskly toward the door. Her bicycle was waiting outside, leaning against the rail. As she unlocked it, she looked back once. The man was still in the lobby, speaking to the receptionist now, but his gaze briefly flicked toward her before turning away. Maria rode off into the busy street, her mind buzzing. She couldn't understand why such a well-dressed man, clearly someone important, had taken so much interest in her small job. She replayed the conversation in her head, wondering if she had said too much. Maybe she had been foolish to speak honestly about the struggles. But then again, he had asked. He had listened. And strangely, instead of feeling troubled, she felt lighter, as if sharing a small piece of her burden had made it easier to carry. That night, after her college class, Maria returned home exhausted. Her mother noticed she was quieter than usual and asked if she was unwell. Maria shook her head and simply said she had a long day. But later, when she lay in bed, she thought again about the stranger in the suit. His curious eyes, his kind smile, the way he had noticed her dedication, it all lingered in her memory. She told herself she would probably never see him again. After all, she was just a delivery girl, and he was clearly someone far above her world. But life has a strange way of surprising people. What Maria didn't know was that the man she had bumped into wasn't simply another office worker rushing to a meeting. He was someone with a deep connection to the very place she worked. And their small encounter in the lobby was only the beginning of a story that would change her work, her studies, and even the way she saw herself. The next morning, Maria arrived at the catering shop earlier than usual. She liked being early because it gave her a few quiet minutes before the rush of orders began. The shop was already alive with the smell of steaming rice, fresh vegetables, and spices sizzling in large pans. The cooks moved quickly, packing lunchboxes with practiced hands, while other delivery workers prepared their routes. Maria tied her hair back neatly, washed her hands, and checked the delivery list for the day. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Her name was listed for 3 deliveries, 2 of which were to buildings she had been to many times before. But when she reached the 3rd address, her eyes paused. It was the same tall glass building where she had bumped into the man in the suit yesterday. For a moment, her stomach tightened. She wondered if she might see him again. The thought made her nervous, but she brushed it away. That building had dozens of offices, and he was probably just a busy worker she would never meet twice. She packed her lunchboxes carefully and began her rounds. The streets were crowded again, the morning heat rising slowly, and the traffic noisier than ever. She wove her bicycle through the lanes with the ease of someone who had done this many times. Her first 2 deliveries went smoothly, as expected. By the time she reached the glass building, she felt more relaxed, convinced that the previous day's encounter had been nothing more than coincidence. As she walked into the cool lobby, balancing 2 boxes, she headed straight for the reception desk. But before she could even greet the receptionist, a voice called out from the side. "Maria!" Her steps froze. Slowly, she turned her head, and there he was, the same man from yesterday, standing near the elevator, his briefcase in hand. He looked exactly as she remembered, calm, composed, with that curious expression in his eyes. She swallowed nervously, unsure how to respond. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly, her voice more formal than before. He walked over, his smile easy. "I was hoping I would see you again," he said. "Do you have time to talk for a few minutes?" Maria blinked, surprised by his words. Delivery work rarely gave her time to stand and chat, but the man's tone was respectful, almost requesting rather than demanding. Still, she hesitated. I I need to deliver these first," she said softly, pointing to the boxes. "Of course," he replied at once, as though he understood. "I'll wait." She hurried to the counter, dropped off the meals, and returned quickly, her mind buzzing with questions. Why was he waiting for her? What did he want? She reminded herself to be cautious, but curiosity tugged at her heart. When she returned, he gestured toward a small seating area in the lobby. They sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither spoke. Maria fiddled with the strap of her bag, while he leaned slightly forward, studying her with interest. "I didn't introduce myself properly yesterday," he said finally. "My name is Mr. Arjun." Maria nodded politely. "Nice to meet you, sir. You told me yesterday about your job," he continued. "I was impressed with your honesty. Not many people would have spoken so openly." Maria lowered her gaze, embarrassed. "I didn't mean any disrespect," she said quickly. "I was only answering your question." Arjun smiled gently. And that's exactly why it mattered. You weren't trying to impress me. You spoke the truth. That's rare. His words made her uneasy, though not in a bad way. She simply didn't understand why a man like him, a man who clearly had an important position, was giving her so much attention. Before she could ask, he said something that made her heartbeat quicken. You see, Maria, I am not just another employee in this building. I am the owner of the catering service you work for. Maria's eyes widened. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. The owner? The very person who ran the business she depended on? She stared at him, speechless, her mind racing back to every word she had spoken yesterday. She had told him about the poor bags, the tight schedules, the struggles of the job. Had she just complained about his company to his face? Her cheeks grew hot. I didn't know, she stammered. I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have. He raised a hand gently, cutting her off. Don't apologize. In fact, I should be thanking you. Do you know how many times I hear from my staff that everything is fine? Too many. And yet, problems never reach me until they become too big to ignore. What you told me yesterday about the lack of proper delivery bags, about the schedules, those are real issues. I needed to hear them. Maria looked down, still feeling uneasy but also slightly relieved. His tone was not angry. It was calm, even appreciative. You work hard, Arjun continued, and you notice things others don't bother to mention. That is valuable. You may not realize it, but your words yesterday gave me an honest picture of how my workers feel. Maria finally found her voice. I didn't mean to complain, sir. I only said what came to my mind. And that's why it mattered, he replied. It was natural, not rehearsed. Do not worry. You didn't do anything wrong. For a moment, Maria sat quietly, trying to process everything. She had always thought of herself as just another small worker, invisible in the busy city. Yet here she was, sitting across from the owner of the company, being told her honesty had value. Arjun leaned back slightly, observing her expression. Tell me, Maria. What would make your work easier? What small changes would help you and others like you? Maria blinked, startled by the question. No one had ever asked her opinion like this before. She hesitated, then spoke slowly. Maybe, better delivery bags. Ones that keep the food hot and steady. And, maybe some space at the shop where we can rest between deliveries. Sometimes we wait outside in the sun. He nodded thoughtfully, taking mental notes. Good suggestions. I'll see what can be done. Maria felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Could it really be that simple? She had spoken honestly, and now the owner himself was considering changes? It felt unreal. Their conversation lasted only a few more minutes before Maria excused herself. She still had classes to attend, and she did not want to linger too long. As she stood to leave, Arjun said something that stayed with her. You may think your work is small, he said, his voice steady. But the truth is, people like you keep this company running. Never forget that. Maria carried those words with her as she rode her bicycle back into the streets. For the first time in months, she felt seen not just as a delivery girl, but as a person whose effort mattered. She didn't know what changes would follow, or how serious his promises were, but one thing was certain, her life had just taken a turn she could never have expected. And though she didn't realize it yet, that small turning point would ripple through her days in ways far greater than she could imagine. The following week felt different for Maria. She continued her deliveries as usual, but in the back of her mind, the memory of her conversation with Mr. Arjun never left her. She wasn't sure whether to believe his words. Owners of big companies were busy people, they might listen politely but then forget about such small things. Yet, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her heart. She wondered if her honesty had truly made an impact. On Monday morning, she arrived at the shop and noticed something unusual. Several new insulated delivery bags were stacked neatly near the counter. They were larger, stronger, and lined with material that could keep food warm for hours. Maria's eyes widened in surprise. She exchanged a glance with another delivery worker, who whispered in amazement, "Where did these come from?" The shop manager, who usually barked out instructions without much conversation, stood straighter that day. He cleared his throat and announced, "These are new delivery bags. From now on, each of you will carry meals in these." The owner himself approved this change. Maria felt her chest tighten. She didn't say anything aloud, but deep inside, she knew exactly why this was happening. Arjun had kept his word. Her words had mattered after all. Over the next few days, Maria noticed more small changes. A shaded corner near the shop had been cleaned and furnished with a few benches. It wasn't much, but it gave the delivery staff a place to rest between trips. The shop manager even began handing out bottles of cold water on particularly hot afternoons. These small gestures, though simple, meant a great deal to the workers. They exchanged quiet smiles, grateful for the unexpected improvements. Maria, however, kept her thoughts to herself. She did not want anyone to know about her conversation with Arjun. She feared the others might think she was trying to act important, or worse, that she was spying on them for the owner. She preferred to remain invisible, quietly doing her work. But inside, her heart carried a quiet pride. She had spoken the truth, and it had led to something good for everyone. One afternoon, while making another delivery at the tall glass building, Maria once again saw Arjun. This time, he was stepping out of an elevator just as she was leaving. He noticed her immediately and walked over. "Maria," he greeted warmly. "How are the new bags working out?" She hesitated, glancing around nervously to make sure no one was listening. "They're very helpful, sir," she admitted softly. "Thank you." His smile widened. "Don't thank me. It was your idea. You spoke, and I listened. That's how progress works." Maria felt her cheeks warm. "I just said what I felt," she murmured. "And that's exactly why it mattered," he said. Then, lowering his voice slightly, he added, "Do not underestimate the value of your perspective. Sometimes the people closest to the work understand the problems better than those sitting in offices." Those words stayed with her. She returned to her bicycle, her thoughts swirling. She had never imagined the owner of the company would speak to her this way, as if her opinion had real weight. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just like a worker but like a person whose voice mattered. The changes at the shop didn't go unnoticed by others, either. Some workers whispered about how unusual it was for the owner to care so much about small details. Others speculated that someone must have spoken to him directly. Maria listened quietly but never revealed her role. It was enough for her to know in her heart. As the weeks passed, Maria's routine grew lighter, not because the work became less, but because she carried a new sense of dignity with her. She cycled with pride, knowing that her efforts were not invisible. Every delivery she made, every meal she carried, felt more meaningful. She no longer saw herself as just a girl struggling to make ends meet, but as someone who played a real part in keeping people nourished and cared for. Her family also noticed a difference. One evening, while they ate dinner together, her mother said, "You look brighter these days, Maria. Did something good happen at work?" Maria hesitated, then smiled. "The work has become a little easier. The company made some changes for us. It feels nice to be noticed." Her mother gave her a proud look. "It's because you put your heart into everything you do. That never goes unseen." The truth was, Maria had never expected such recognition. She had only wanted to survive, to study, to support her family. But life had given her more than she had imagined. By simply being honest, she had touched the ear of someone who had the power to make real change. One late afternoon, after finishing her last delivery, Maria was preparing to leave the glass building when Arjun appeared once again. He seemed busy, but he paused when he saw her. "Maria," he called, "I wanted to tell you something." She walked over, curious. "I've been thinking," he began. "Your honesty opened my eyes to what my workers go through. I don't want that to stop here. If you notice anything else, anything that could improve the way we work, don't hesitate to speak up. Consider it your responsibility." Maria's eyes widened. "My responsibility?" "Yes," he said firmly, but with kindness. "You have earned my trust. I value your observations. Keep sharing them. Together, we can make things better." For a long moment, Maria stood in silence, her mind racing. She was just a delivery girl. How could she carry such responsibility? And yet, the way he spoke, she felt a strange courage rise within her. She nodded slowly. "I'll try, sir," she said softly. Arjun gave her a satisfied smile. "That's all I ask." As she rode home that evening, the city lights beginning to glow, Maria felt something she had never felt before: empowerment. She was no longer invisible. Her voice, her small suggestions, had begun to shape the very company she worked for. The revelation settled deep inside her heart: sometimes, change doesn't come from grand speeches or powerful positions. Sometimes, it begins with a simple, honest word spoken at the right moment. And Maria, who had thought herself too small to matter, realized that she was part of something bigger than herself. Her journey was no longer just about carrying meals, it was about carrying hope for herself, her co-workers, and maybe even for others who needed to believe their voices could be heard. Maria's life began to feel different in quiet but powerful ways. She was still the same girl who woke up early, packed her books for college, and rode her bicycle through busy streets with lunchboxes strapped neatly at the back. She still carried the weight of responsibilities, still returned home tired at night, still worried about exams and family expenses. But there was something new inside her now: a sense of dignity, a quiet strength that had grown ever since her unexpected meeting with Arjun. She often thought back to the moment when she had bumped into him in the lobby. At the time, she had felt embarrassed, clumsy, even invisible. She had never imagined that the stranger she nearly spilled curry on would be the very person who owned the company she worked for. It felt like something out of a story, and yet it had happened in real life. That one ordinary moment had shifted the way she saw herself and her place in the world. The new delivery bags made her work easier. The small resting corner near the shop gave her and her co-workers a chance to breathe between deliveries. And most of all, the fact that the owner himself had listened to her words gave her a sense of respect she had never felt before. Each time she cycled through the streets, she no longer felt like just another face in the crowd. She felt like her work mattered. Her co-workers began noticing changes too. One day, as they sat on the benches after a long set of deliveries, one of the older men sighed with relief. "I never thought we'd get something like this," he said, sipping water from a bottle. "It feels good to be treated like humans for once." Another worker, a young boy not much older than Maria, added, "Do you think the owner really cares about us? I've worked in other places, and no one bothered to make things better." Maria listened quietly, her heart swelling with pride. She didn't speak about her role in all of this, but she smiled faintly, knowing that even the smallest voice could make a difference. At college, Maria carried herself differently too. She still studied hard, still worried about her grades, but she no longer felt weighed down by invisibility. Her classmates sometimes complained about assignments, about how hard life felt, and she would think to herself, if only they knew what hard work really means. But she didn't resent them. Instead, she felt grateful for her journey. Her struggles had given her strength that books alone could never teach. One evening, after finishing a long day of classes and deliveries, Maria sat at her small desk at home, her notebook open in front of her. But instead of writing equations or notes, she found herself writing down thoughts. She wrote about the people she met on the streets, the receptionist who always smiled, the balloon seller on the corner, the children running barefoot. She wrote about the way life surprised her with small lessons. And most of all, she wrote about the day she met Arjun, and how a simple accident had turned into something that shaped her path. As she wrote, she realized the lesson was not just for her but for anyone who might read her words. Life has a way of noticing honesty. Even if the world seems too big, even if you feel invisible, the truth you carry has weight. It can reach someone's heart, even if you don't realize it at the time. Weeks turned into months, and Maria continued to grow. Arjun occasionally met her in the lobby or at the shop, always asking if things were improving. He didn't treat her like just a worker anymore, he treated her like a trusted observer, someone whose words could guide him. Though their conversations were brief, they carried meaning. One day, as she was leaving after a delivery, Arjun said, "Maria, do you know why I asked you all those questions that first day?" She shook her head, curious. "Because I wanted to see how someone speaks when they think no one important is listening. Most people change their words depending on who they are talking to. But you didn't. You spoke with honesty. And that is why I will always remember you." Maria's heart felt warm at his words. She realized that honesty, something she had once thought was too small to matter, had been the very thing that changed her life. Her family also felt the difference. Her father, who had been discouraged after losing his job, began to find hope again as he watched Maria's determination. Her mother often said, "Maria, you have taught us that even in the hardest times, a truthful heart brings light." Those words gave Maria strength during her long study nights. The more she reflected, the more she understood that the real lesson was bigger than herself. She began sharing it with her younger cousins, with friends at college, with anyone who complained that their lives were too small to matter. She would tell them, "Don't think your voice has no value. Speak with truth, even if no one seems to be listening. You never know whose heart it will reach." Her life continued with the same challenges: exams to pass, bills to pay, deliveries to complete, but she faced them with a new spirit. She no longer carried only lunchboxes, she carried dignity, hope, and a belief that small acts could ripple outward into the world. Sometimes, when she cycled through the city streets, she would glance at the tall glass building and smile. To anyone else, it was just another office tower. But to Maria, it was the place where her story had turned. The place where an ordinary accident had led to an extraordinary lesson. She knew she might not always work for the catering company. One day, she hoped to graduate, to find a better job, maybe even to start something of her own. But no matter where life took her, she would always carry the memory of that day and the truth it revealed. Life doesn't always reward the loudest voices, she realized. Sometimes, it notices the quiet ones, the ones who speak with sincerity, without expectation. And sometimes, those voices are enough to create real change. Maria's journey had begun as just a way to survive, a way to keep studying and support her family. But it had given her more than she ever expected: respect, courage, and the lesson that no one is too small to matter. And so, her story became more than her own. It became a reminder to anyone willing to listen: every action, no matter how small, carries meaning. Every word, if spoken with truth, can touch the world in ways unseen. Maria never looked at her bicycle, her lunchboxes, or her job the same way again. They were no longer just symbols of hard work, they were proof that even in the simplest roles, there is dignity, and even in the busiest days, there are moments that can change everything.